Hello, Patty. Sana is coming and joining. Welcome everybody to our first Lunch and Learn. But this is actually our third weekly event in the last 3 weeks. We have Patty. Sana is coming and joining. So this is our my end. So what are we doing today? Just to talk us through that pretty quickly. Slides, and then I'm going to be largely slide 3. So we're going to be talking about how invisible work can hinder your career transition. And we will put a recording of this replay in our Facebook group. So if you would like to see the replay, you can get that over to you. And if you're watching the replay, then you're probably already in the Facebook group. The purpose of these weekly sessions, and we're going to be running them through March, is to really help create a judgment-free and safe space for people who are going through transition, trying to go through transition, whether that transition is trying to progress up, change jobs, change industry. You're not sure what that is in terms of a career. You may have a straight plan, so we want to have to create a space to support us in that space. We want to create community, so you can begin to connect with people who may be on a similar journey with you as well. We want to talk about strategic career moves opposed to just working harder. We're trying to provide some unconventional unconventional advice. And I'm also a big fan of sustainability. I did a movie about what an unsustainable approaches to career can look like. And we are really committed in this community to create this, to answer the question, how do I sustainably build a fulfilling and challenging career? That's what I'm trying to do. A bit about me. I'm Jimmy Okudanjo. I'm the founder of Arise Firebird Impacted. I'm the director of the Arise Firebird movie. I have 20 years in corporate management, consulting, and operations management. I've worked in 14 countries, delivered over $250 million in benefits from the consulting projects I've led. I've worked with hundreds of technical leaders around the world as well. So I produced a documentary just to really understand, document some of the challenges women and women of color are facing within the modern corporate workplace. And really my mission, my focus right now is helping high achieving women navigate their next career chapter by helping them transform maybe uncertainty into decisive action without burnout or being overwhelmed. And ultimately the goal is to help really decide, I really want us to be able to achieve our potential at work and create generational wealth through our jobs, which I think for a lot of us is how we wish to create generational wealth. So let's go. Now, I will say at half past the hour, or let's say 35 minutes past the hour, we'll start recording. So if people do want to stay behind and ask more questions, you absolutely can do that, and that won't be part of the recorded section. So you're totally free to do that. And as we do this lunch and learns, I definitely would love to be able to do mini coaching sessions where people do want to talk a bit more about their problem and get some coaching from me for about 10 minutes. I'll do that also offline once we stop recording, because I recognize some of this conversation you may not necessarily want to be with. But if you have questions, please raise your hand if we're going through the discussion. Put your questions in the chat. Feel free to do that, and I will pick up the questions as best as I can as we go through. So I think that is it. So we are gonna kick off, and I will stop sharing. So today, just to recap, we're talking about invisible work and how it can hinder career progression. And if anything I talk about today resonates with you at all, I would love to invite you to discuss how my coaching program could help you. It's designed for high achieving women to navigate their next career chapter without burnout or being overwhelmed, to help go from uncertainty to clarity. But these lunch and learns are really focused on giving value in the lunch and learn. Please do ask the questions you want to ask while you're here. And my commitment is I'll answer as many as I can in the time that we have. Okay, so let's get started. Career transitions can be messy, and they can be difficult, exhausting. And just put in the chat for you guys all that are listening, for you ladies and guys and people that are listening, how would you describe whether you're in transition or you've been in transition or you're constantly in transition? What words would you use to describe a career transition? You can type that in the chat. That would be helpful, just so I get an idea of kind of where we all are with that. Insecure, right? Someone's insecure. Impossible, stressful, scary. All right, and what makes it even more complicated for a lot of us is that, you know, whether under the best of circumstances, moving from one role to another, one company for another, trying to change what you're doing, shifting industries, trying to position yourself for a promotion, demands energy, clarity, and focus. But what happens what do you think happens when we're already exhausted before we even start the transition journey? Again, I'd love your thoughts in the chat. No energy, thank you, someone said. No focus, burnt out. Very, thank you. And one of the factors that drive this, that I want to present to you, my hypothesis, is invisible work. And I've heard a lot about the extra work that we do as women in the workplace, people of color in the workplace. But what is invisible work? Well, it's all the additional tasks and responsibilities that you have to shoulder that remain unacknowledged and uncompensated. But they need to be done to get your job done, to keep your job happy, to keep your boss happy, to keep the peace. Could you give me some examples, again, of invisible work that you have done, are doing, have to do? So examples of visible work for me that I think a lot of us do: managing difficult relationships. A big one that we have to do to get our jobs done is to be able to get antagonistic, difficult to work with, borderline, sometimes outright abusive leaders, co-workers, getting them into consensus and managing those relationships. That is part of the work. Whether it's people who don't believe we should be there, people who have such bad behavior and they've been allowed to stay in the organization, managing those relationships so that we can be effective, so our teams can be effective. For those of us that are leaders, this is invisible work. Emotional caretaking, carrying the emotions of other people, having to present ourselves emotionally one way so that we can make other people feel emotionally comfortable so that we can get our jobs done. Going above and beyond. So when maybe a colleague, all they need to do is send an email to wrap up the work, we may have to send a 30-page report. And that seems to be comfortable. Or we volunteer, we say yes to everything, volunteer to everything to really show that we are ready for the next level. Getting involved in volunteer projects at work, volunteering to get involved in investigations, doing market research, going to marketing events, again, to support. And so for some of us, it starts out as enthusiastic. But as we progress in our careers, this does add up on top of our quote unquote day job. And then on workplace housekeeping, let's handle all the little things that keep things going. So while, yes, it may not be that you have to, so some of it may be ordering lunch, taking notes in meetings for sure. In my case, going to buy cookies for workshops because nobody thought about the fact that we're having an executive workshop and we need to have food for these people. But it's also the space around, it's kind of the space of, it's having to think about what are the other you haven't thought about. and constantly trying to do that constant risk assessment to see what may have been missed, because if it goes wrong, it's going to sit with us. So these are examples of some of the invisible work that we end up doing all the time in our jobs. And it's just, as high achievers, overachievers, we just get used to this because this is just how we deliver. This isn't a comprehensive list. I know somebody may be thinking, well, isn't that just your job? You're supposed to manage relationships. Yes and no. For a lot of women and women of color, the extent of antagonism that we're having to manage is much more severe and much more intense. And it's a lot more work in trying to persuade people because A, we not have the authority to do it, or the authority we have is being undermined. So while maybe someone can just say, listen, Steve, you're going to do it X, Y, Z, like it or lump it. You know, we say that we get a call from HR saying you're just being too aggressive or being too abusive or you're bullying. Or Steve will like, I'm not going to do that unless your boss tells me. So we have to find other techniques to maneuver around this. Now, does anyone relate to this? You can just put a yes or a no, a thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this something that we relate to? All right, so I see some thumbs up. Okay, cool. The real cost of these tasks isn't just, it's your time, it's your energy, your creativity, but also it can impact your ability to plan for your future. Why? I initially thought about invisible work and career transition, and it was hard. What is even the link to this? We talked about it. Yeah, invisible work. What's the big deal? We do it. It's unfair. It's not a big deal, right? You just kind of live with it. But it can have an impact for those of us trying to think about what comes next in our career. So number one, normalizing this invisible work and the way we often absorb it, we discount our contributions and our capabilities. So when we're coming to even negotiate another role, think about what comes next. Quite often, we don't include the invisible work. So you're thinking, I want to be a project manager. It's true, but I have also 10 years of negotiation skills and conflict resolution skills because I've had to deal with these people for 19 years. And I can successfully demonstrate how I can get 10 executives who I don't have any, who don't report to me, and how I was able to get them on board onto a program. And yes, it took me 6 months or 2 years, but that is a skill set you have now developed. And we don't factor that into, okay, how do I take this into my next role? The coordinating, the holding space for others, the greater sense of empathy, what you've learned from having to carry so many other people's emotions. Not that it may not be something you want to take into your next role, but it is still something you can say, this makes me a better leader. Because having had 200 conversations with people about XYZ in my last role, I understand this industry so much better. I understand what the labor force really is struggling with because of all of this work I've been doing. But we discount all of that because it's not on our job description and because maybe our line manager won't appreciate it. And granted, you can, so we're thinking about that next job or that next project and what qualifies us for it, we're looking at our job description alone. And that can create some degree of stress, I think, because we also know on some level the job requires so much more work than that. And you may be thinking, because I'm going to this next job, I still don't feel qualified. Well, yeah, because 70% of what you actually do, you're not actually including that in how you're presenting yourself. And understand that's how I was trained. That's how I grew up, not counting those things in. Second impact of invisible work is it causes exhaustion. It can make us tired. And just being tired when you're filling up your days with additional labor, sometimes out of choice, we're overachievers, high achievers. We say yes to a lot of stuff maybe we shouldn't be saying yes to, but sometimes it isn't out of choice. You have to do this additional stuff to make your work happen, sometimes out of fear, out of doubt, you have very little mental space left to imagine what's next. You have not a lot of space left to think about what could that next step be, that what could the next chapter of my career look like, and how can I begin to bring that into manifestation? We can be very stuck on, okay, well, it just has to be a promotion. And I'm a big believer in career enrichment opposed to career advancement. Because career enrichment, advancement, promotion sits under that. But there's so much more to growing and building and having a great career aside from your boss promoting you. But when we're under that level of pressure, we don't see as many options because we're tired all the time. We're hyper vigilant all the time. So where do you even come up with the time to think about, what's my next move going to be? Third, invisible work can create anxiety and fear about transitions. The constant pressure to do everything, to be everything, on one level can make us worry that, is my next job going to be like this? If I'm going to move into another role, am I going to be on all the time? Am I going to have to deal with another set of 10 executives who constantly are non-committal, undermining, and I'm constantly having to manage their emotions. I'm constantly having to persuade and constantly having to create 30-page reports. And we have a 2-hour conversation trying to get them on side to come back tomorrow, and they've forgotten about the conversation. That can create a lot of anxiety when thinking about what's next. And ultimately, it keeps us stuck because we're tired, because we're anxious, because we are selling ourselves short. When we begin to think about that next step, for some of us, we haven't really resolved in ourselves exactly where we are, where we really, really are. We're only looking at part of the picture. And I think to myself, well, so what can we do about it? Well, I could tell my boss. Well, and I think the big thing that people say, and I want to talk about, is the very, very clear college answer, which is an answer, is, well, just explain to your manager, your CEO, your line manager, HR, exactly what's going on, and tell them what you want, and then they'll do it. Now, I think that there's a caveat to that. If you have a highly competent boss who is good in the, who's a good person, then having that conversation should be sufficient in terms of right-sizing your workload and getting the support you need to transition to whatever you need to do. A good human would put your career goals above the business. If you have a boss who is good, but not competent, then they will empathize. That's so terrible. What you're saying breaks my heart. That shouldn't happen to you, but chances are your workload is not going to change. If you have a boss who is competent, but not a good person, well, they probably know you're doing all that work and that needs to be done anyway. And they may make you feel like that's just the job. No one else complains, even though you're doing more than everybody else. They know they need you doing all that work. They'll make it seem like it's your fault. There's something wrong with you. And if you have a boss who's not a good person and incompetent, they might even get you fired for saying that. What you're saying will be used against you in your appraisal, used against you at every single angle. So is it worth saying something? You need to assess the environment before you, and know the kind of leadership you're dealing with before you make that assessment. And that's why, again, having this space, having the coaching program, our coaching community may give you that space to kind of sense check that. So I want to stop for a second and just give you a chance to kind of, if anybody wants to ask a question or share in the chat, is there another impact of invisible work on your career transition or your career progression aspirations?
There is a management consultant, your best friend, sister,
So if you go into if you can, yeah, just put in the chat. So anything that you agree with, disagree with, what are your thoughts on invisible work and its impact? Is there something that particularly surprised you that you think, yeah, actually, this could be a challenge for you? I'll give you guys 10 seconds to put it in the chat before I move on. And it's a quick reminder, as I mentioned at the beginning, if anything here we're talking about resonates with you and you'd love to discuss with me further about the coaching program, how that might help, do let me know. It's really designed for high achieving women to navigate their next career chapter and transform their career journey from uncertainty to decisive action without burnout. So I have talked about what invisible work. Oh, Patty, thank you. The main problem is not having time to work for your future plan. Yes, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. So what do we need to do? Okay, Janice says, identify with wanting career enrichment and not being able to prioritize it. Absolutely. I know for myself, when I worked in the corporate world, even before I became a COO, I truly believe if I could just outwork everybody, I'll be good. And that worked to a point. It did work to a point, but I could never. I'll give an example. I had always wanted to do a TED Talk. Over 10 years before I did my TED Talk, I wanted to do them. I never had the space to think about really what I should be doing a TED Talk on and how to make that happen. That should have been part of my career enrichment plan. There was no way my employer was going to, none of my employers were going to support me on that. Not because they were bad people or that they were good people, but it just wasn't in their zone of genius to help me with. But I had no capacity to sit back and think, okay, what do I want my TED Talk to be about? How can I start doing a TED Talk? It was just go all the time. It was a great idea. And do I think, and for some people in some professions would being a conference speaker, doing a TED Talk, position them for more senior roles in the future? For some people, yeah, absolutely. That could be part of their career advancement plan, is conference speaking, to position them for their next promotion. But because we are 100% on it at work, 120%, 130%, and we only think my boss promoting me is the way, we close all the other doors of what could actually happen. Someone else has shared, this subject has got to me because I've been told at so many places that I was the reason people would stay despite the leadership. But then the emotional care was burning you out. I am sorry that's the case, but yes, who's taking care of you? Who is taking care of you if you're taking care of everybody else? Who's taking care of your future? Who's taking care of your kids' future, your partner's future, your nieces and nephews' future that you want to support? So we have to create those spaces and carve out that time for us to think about our future and make those next steps. I don't regret doing a TED Talk 10 years after I wanted to, but what became clear for me was, had I made that space out for myself and had that community of people who saw career enrichment beyond just being promoted by my line manager, I would have probably done it a lot sooner. So we need some mindset shifts. I want to share a couple mindset shifts and a couple actions that you can do. And then we'll open up for questions and then we'll go offline. And what offline means is we are recording this session. We'll take some questions with the recording. But if people want to stay after we turn off the recording, we'll take some real questions. So for those who are watching the recording, no, you're not going to be able to hear those real questions. But if you want to ask some real questions or deeper questions, please join us next Wednesday. Okay, so there are a couple of mindsets, and you can do either or both. One would be, one is we have to stop pretending that this workload is normal or manageable when it isn't. So we have to be radically honest with yourself, with everything we're dealing with. Like, what is the stuff I'm doing beyond my quote unquote, objectives? What is the stuff that I'm doing? And take some time and write it all down. Secondly, recognize that saying no is a strategic skill, not a failure. You can't say no to everything, but being able to strategically know when to say no is going to be essential. So 2 actions you can take. So action 1, put a ring on it, make it official. If there is documents, and what are the things you're doing? So part of my job is managing 700 toxic, you can say toxic, problematic, executive, whatever, put in whatever euphemism you want to put in there, but make that is part of your job. Put that on your LinkedIn profile and really document the work you did to get there, because that is something you can bring into your career enrichment strategy. You can bring it into your next appraisal conversation. Whether or not you get points for it isn't relevant, but you can then own that, like, this is part of my story. And it may take some time. It may take you a long time to document everything, because some of us are doing a lot of stuff. Second action is identify one invisible task you can say no to. And that can be scary. So I'm not saying say no to everything, but even to start with, is there something you can say no to? You can stop doing without serious consequences. You can stop doing, you can back away from, to create a bit more space for yourself. Because every no that you say does create space for yes. And it may require a little bit of thought, reflection, support to do that. But understanding that the work that invisible work plays on your transition, it really could be the difference for some of us between being able to take real action into our new future or staying stuck. So make it visible, make it official, put a ring on it. Even just doing that can give you some ideas. And if possible, think about one thing you can say that you're going to start working. And that is what I have. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions. Anybody have any questions or comments that they would like to share? You can either put it in the chat or raise your hand and come up and ask the question or comment. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to now stop recording, and I'm going to ask for questions offline. So if you are watching the replay, yes, and you'd like to be part of this, then wherever you're seeing this, there should be a comment section below. Just put a comment in there that you'd like to be invited, and we'll get you the invitation to this session.